at some point in your life, you have to invest this time. It's just the question is when and how to keep it as compressed as possible. But it
Yeah.
also made me realize, and I think it adds a lot of value, in my opinion, to what I bring to my colleagues and employees, is I appreciate time extremely now for myself and also for my employees. So I always tell them, listen, time is way more important than anything else. And this is one of those life lessons that I got, naive as it might be, but it's just this is the one thing that you really don't have much control of. No matter what you do, it will keep ticking, you know. So just make the most out of it. So just if work is what you're gonna enjoy, if it is spending time with family or friends, what you're gonna enjoy, just prioritize that, because time is more precious than anything else, more than success, more than money, more than anything else.
Waleed, welcome to our Lighting Hero series. It's a real pleasure to get to talk to you, not face to face in real life, but at least face to face on screen. I would love to get a better understanding of your journey. For those people who don't really know you, maybe you can introduce yourself and what you do, where you come from, and what's your daily life look like at the moment?
Sure. Well, thanks, Martha, for inviting me over. I mean, I'm not sure about the heroes part, but at least just being a lighting, I guess maybe it's a hero as it is. So, yeah, just for those who don't know me, my name is Waleed Fakousa, and I was born in Egypt. I lived my first years of my life over there, and then I moved to Germany. I studied, and I got introduced to the world of lighting over there. I started my career there, and then I moved to the United Arab Emirates around 11 years ago. And currently, I run the CD+M lighting design studio in Dubai. It's a Los Angeles-based company, but I run the Dubai and the Middle East studio, and I also founded and managed the Lighting Institute for the past 6 years.
I'm always wondering what is the first trigger? What gets you into lighting? Because we study things, and then I wonder what triggered you to get into lighting.
Yeah, it's a good and very common question, and I think it's interesting to hear everybody comes with a story or a different narrative that comes along with it, and usually it's inspiring in one way or another. I'm not sure mine is so inspiring as others, but I think mine was purely I studied architecture. I have architecture background, and I think we had just a simple subject where you need to distribute the light in one way or another, and I think I thought back then it's easy, it looks easy, and I'm comfortable doing it. But that was it. I didn't know that lighting has any depth beyond what I learned in the architecture
Mm.
school. And literally, I was looking for opportunities to work, and I realized that I need to get to a postgraduate studies. And I literally opened Google back then, and I said,
Yeah.
"Is there something called postgraduate education in lighting?"
Mm.
And surely enough, I found few names popping up, and one
Yeah.
very reputable university in Germany, and I applied for it, and I got immediately accepted. And I think the one thing that just everything fell behind afterwards was the fact that the first lecture in the university, it just felt so natural and felt right from day one.
Yeah.
And ever since, it was never a job, but more of a hobby, and that's it.
It felt good. Yeah. I know the feeling because that's how I got into lighting it well. I straight away fell in love with it. That it sort of followed a natural flow.
Yeah,
So I can identify with that.
yeah.
So did you join a company or did you start your own business? How did that go?
Yeah, that was also another interesting thing. So back then, when you're a student and studying lighting design, that all of people are asking for an internship, talking about
Yeah, yeah,
internship.
yeah, yeah.
And I want to go to this kind of company in the United States, New York, London, and so on and so forth. And I got an advice from one of my professors telling me, listen, you are already here. You're already moving from another country all the way
Mm.
to Germany. So why don't you make the most out of what Germany can offer you? And I think this was one of the best advice I would get. and I applied at one firm called Kardorf Engineers in Berlin,
Uh-huh.
and here I am, this fresh out of school with my little portfolio, and go in there, and for
Yeah.
some reason the synergy between me and my bosses back then was incredible, and they were doing, me born in Egypt, and they were doing the Egyptian Museum in Germany.
Ah, okay.
So there was a lot of fun and appreciation of the Egyptian culture of some sort. So they thought, you know what, might be actually useful to bring someone who comes from this culture and
Yeah,
maybe add
yeah,
value. And I just and we I got immediately accepted, although there was incredible number of interns applying for it. But I was lucky to be one of two only got selected, and it was, to
yeah.
be honest, I was so easy. So I was lucky. I was definitely fortunate to get to this job.
So
So
that was your first project as well, the Egypt, the Egypt project. Was that the
the,
first one that you?
I got a small project in the beginning where they kind of testing my attitude more than my actual performance. But I jumped straight into it's called the Neues Museum in Berlin, and
Mhm.
I think this is what made the whole lighting spark for me, because,
Mm.
as you know, Martin, it's just when you talk about museums and we talk about artifacts that thousands
Yeah,
years old, then you bring your A game and lighting in every possible way.
yeah,
And I learned a lot. I spoke to curators. I learned, like, I have curators sometimes need to tell me how to light the object, and I was like,
yeah.
why the curator is the one who's telling me this? So there was a lot of eye openings to many of those things,
Mm.
and yeah, it's just from a technical side, aesthetic, creativity, because it's an old building. So that was my first. So lighting the most infamous head of a Nefertiti queen was.
Yes.
Was just the first masterpiece you can do at such an early age.
Yeah. So how long did you stay in Germany? Was that I assume you stayed a while with that company, and then after that, you probably got the itch and maybe wanted to do more.
No, I stayed at this company. So I between my studies for a few years, and then I think total like 7 years, 7, 8 years. And I was extremely comfortable in the company. I was very happy. Everybody was phenomenal, incredible team. Again, I never felt like I'm going to work, so it was so hard to leave them after such a long time. But I stayed with them for 5 years, almost 4.5 years,
Mm.
and incredible discipline, atmosphere, and the German attitude, and building your charisma around this team was monumental and transformational for me, I guess.
So what was the next step after that? Did you still stayed in Germany, or is that when you sort of moved to the Middle East?
Yeah, so I had my brother lived in Dubai, and I came to visit him one summer, not one winter. It felt like a summer though, but it was a winter, and I went to visit him, and it was an occasional, just a casual tourist trip, and I go there, and my parents were visiting as well, so it had a nice warmth to it to reunite with the family
Yes.
after such a long time. So that was a one side of tendency, like, okay, where can we be all together at the same place? And funny enough, I how it would be work in the Middle East, and I had a couple of interviews, and I wasn't really that happy with,
Mm.
no offense, but the culture of lighting compared to what Germany was back then. I wasn't really incredibly impressed, if it makes sense.
Right.
And so I decided, no, I'm happy in Germany. I'm moving back, and let's just not even open this door. And a gentleman calls me on the day I'm traveling, and he tells me, listen, are you Waleed? Yes. Who are you? My name is Bill Johnson, and I run a Dubai studio for a company called CD+M. I don't know you guys. Let's have a cup of coffee. I told him my flight is in the evening. So I mean, okay, just let's get a quick cup of coffee in one of the shopping malls here, or no. So we go to meet, and like, what do you guys do? We just established the Dubai chapter, and
Yeah.
I need someone exactly who you are, has some Arabic culture to them, so they can actually speak
Mm.
the language when we need to, can speak English to a decent extent, and most importantly, has the German structure within them, so help me build the company. And surely enough, 6 months later,
Mm.
I'm with my suitcase moving on to here, and
Look at that.
yeah, that's
The rest
history.
is history.
That's right. That's right.
So it's quite interesting because obviously with your Egyptian background and then your German Grundlichkeit,
Mm.
as they say, right? And then
Genau.
Middle East. I've been traveling myself also a lot. I've done projects all over the world, but the cultural differences sometimes are quite interesting because people approach projects quite differently, I think, in different countries with different cultures. What's your experience? Because you obviously been around as well, and I assume that you've been in the US as well. So how do you look at that?
Yeah, I think if I can backtrack this a little bit, I lived in Manchester for a couple of years before I moved to Germany, and I think the program in Germany allowed me to travel to most part of Europe before I
Mm,
really get to be exposed to the US world, if I
mm,
may. So I think I was fortunate enough to see different cultures from the European side and see the mindset and why they're thinking. And I was actually quite immersed because I enjoyed it. So I would
mm.
enjoy Scandinavian culture. I would enjoy German. I would enjoy, and it's so interesting how they're one border apart, but yet they're extremely vast in transition.
Yeah,
But when you come to the Middle East, you'd expect what all the social media tells you. This is the Middle East.
yeah.
This is how it is. This is how they
Uh,
think. This is how they dress. Blah 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 blah. But I think when I came to Dubai, it was a wow moment for me because everything
mm.
was extremely impressive. Here's the largest tower in the world. This is the
Yeah, 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 yeah,
largest.
yeah.
What it's always the largest, the biggest, the
Biggest,
most impressive.
yeah, yeah,
It's all these kind of things. So it was fascinating in that sense. And to be fair to Dubai, being such a leading city globally, but it's light years ahead of many other cities and countries. So Dubai has its own little world
yeah.
that offered basically. But back to this culture part again, I was I wasn't very impressed from the lighting culture standpoint as much as all the other fascination. And I
Mm,
thought that might be a challenge because I was 26 years old back then, and I thought like, you know
mm,
what, I think I have enough grounds to really explore myself and what I can do and offer, and I thought maybe I can contribute slightly in changing the way this culture perceives lighting, and I was the first Arabic speaking person to actually have this skill set in lighting. So I thought maybe that's a responsibility I have to take on, and yeah, that's it. And I try
Is
to.
that is that where the lighting institute comes in, where you say you want to
This
change a bit?
Yes, this is where the seed is. I wasn't sure really where to start with that. I thought like I want to tell people how lighting is important, how good things we can offer.
Yeah.
So, but that was just the first seed possibly because it took
Mm,
3 4 years to get me to like this has to happen
mm.
before the Lighting Institute kicked in.
Maybe you can explain a little bit about what the lighting institute is, because maybe not everybody really knows what the lighting institute is and does, and what your role is in there.
Of course, of course. So I moved here in 2012 to Dubai, and I have been fortunate enough to work on these mind-blowing projects.
Mm,
I don't want to talk about it much on this call. The way that we can do that in a more lengthy one, but I think 4 years in after doing these projects, I realized that I always come to a very similar point with many clients that I'm telling them why lighting is important, why you want to hire a lighting designer, why, why,
mhm.
why all these things. And I
Yeah.
thought actually I'm wasting time explaining this because people need to understand first the value of lighting before you think about hiring a lighting designer. Hiring a lighting designer, when you know the value of lighting, is a whole different story than
Mm.
hiring someone and convincing them that I add value.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So I thought, you know what, I'll take a step back and how about I teach what is
yeah. Mm.
lighting, why lighting is important, why it's valuable for certain kind of projects, primarily to clients, to architects, to end users, and so on and so forth. So I ask people around, what do you guys think of that? And I get ballrooms, hands up, raised hands saying, yes, we are ready for it, we are excited to do so, and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
And I grouped with great partners to establish this because it's many people's efforts,
Mhm.
different segments, different approach, different attitudes. And one thing led to another. And here we are, the Lighting Institute, founded in 2016. and we we try to raise awareness. That's the primary goal, but primarily through courses to professionals or sometimes students in 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, depends on your exact need and expectations. We tailor specific courses from fundamentals of lighting design to the illumination for homes or for shopping malls or for retail stores or food and beverage or hospitals. So based on exactly what you want, we tailor it a little bit to give you a little bit more, even things that you don't think you need. Like for instance, we teach sometimes daylight to architects who ask for
Yeah.
lighting for
Yeah.
offices. So they don't necessarily think that they need it, but they came up to realize later on that's the case. So here we are almost getting to be close to 6,000 participants over this period of time, which is,
Wow.
yeah, it's been a
Impressive.
privilege to do that for such a long time.
But it's
Yeah.
not necessarily not necessarily towards lighting designers. It's more industry target groups probably that you're aiming this at.
Exactly. I mean, we have the spectrum, the demography of people who have been joining us is just phenomenal. And some of them, many of them come from the sales world, some of them from the manufacturing, end users, literally homeowners, housewives, uh,
Mm.
and sometimes designers. It's not necessarily specific for fully experienced lighting designers unless they need to get exposure of
Mm.
the kind of projects that I worked on, for instance, or one of the mentors. I think the main advantage that we don't necessarily teach what are in books, because there's so many things are in books that we want to refer people to books. We want
Yes.
to refer them to universities. So just to be clear on this, we're not trying to generate lighting designers. We're not bringing people in 1 or 2 or 3 days to become a lighting designer. That's by far not the case. Never was and never will. There are institutions for that. There is a length, there is an experience that comes along with it that we encourage those people to. In fact, we
Mm.
refer them to many of those universities. But we just tell people how important it is, how a lighting designer can help you implement it in your designs. Or if you are exploring the studies of it, these are the universities to go to.
Mm.
So yeah, that's about it. And in fact, I personally learned a lot from these students because
Well,
each one of them comes from, I mean, Martin, with all seriousness, I taught lighting to people from marketing, and I
very
can give you like master class that I learned from those guys in my lectures on how they see lighting drive sales, for instance. This is not
mm.
something you get in schools. I'm not talking about energy efficiency and saving
Yeah.
electricity bills. I'm talking
Yeah.
about like psychological mindsets, and this is what drags, because there are all different researches that lighting designers are not necessarily aware of, but
Yeah.
I learned from it over time. So it was a good trade, you know.
That's the gratifying part of education because it's a two-way process. You get so much in return. I have the same thing. I'm also teaching and educating as much as I can to various platforms. And I find, I'm also participating as a mentor in programs. And what you get back from your mentee and what you get back from the people that you educate is really gratifying and helps also to form yourself. You get a much wider view of the world in the process. That's true.
Very true.
Um,
Very, very true.
how do you find the time to do both of these things? Because of course you have I guess, a very busy practice, and I know how busy the Middle East is, and probably outside as well. And then doing this lighting institute as well. You must have a multifunctional way of working.
Yes, it has been. I cannot tell you I'm a superhero. I can tell you for a fact that it was very challenging to establish both, because to kick things started requires a lot of attention and focus and many other things. So I typically suggest, now that I've gone through the cycle, the earlier you do this, the better. Just to spend the time early on rather than on the later end. Not necessarily that you don't have a chance if the years have passed by, but sooner enough to just go for it. It's okay to fail a little bit on that front. But it was very hard in the beginning. I didn't have time at all. I was sleeping very little, number of hours, but it was rewarding after all. It was very hard, but now it's much easier. Always I can do things better, whether on the CDM front or on the Lighting Institute front, and it's always going to be the case. That's what drives me to tomorrow. But it was hard, but now it's we got the rhythm over time.
Yeah. Do you manage to balance that with your family life? if you have any
Good,
time.
good, good and embarrassing question. Because I haven't at some point, okay, and I fairly admit that, and there is nothing that kind of bring this time back. But I think what's the condolence and the reward for me in that sense is that now I'm buying myself time that not necessarily that I could have afforded otherwise. So I think you at some point in your life you have to invest this time. It's just the
Mm,
question is when and how to keep it as compressed as possible. But it
yeah.
also made me realize, and I think it adds a lot of value in my opinion to what I bring to my colleagues and employees, is I appreciate time extremely now for myself and also for my employees. So I
Mm,
always tell them, listen, time is way more important than anything else. And
mm,
this is one of those life lessons that I got, naive as it might be, but it's just this is the one thing that you really don't have much control of. No matter what you do, it will keep ticking, you know. So just make the most out of it. So
mm,
just if work is what you're gonna enjoy, if it is spending time with family or friends, what you're gonna enjoy, just
mm,
prioritize that because time
mm,
is more precious than anything else, more than success, more than money, more than anything else. So just make sure you make the most out of it. So I
yeah.
think just compressing it in certain number of years, being hard as they are, just gives me again some time to do that. So yes, I
Yeah.
did compromise some of this time with my family and friends. I wish I haven't, but also on the other hand, now it pays off a little bit.
But it is a fact that I think when you're younger and you're building your career, I think you're more focused in developing that career, and certainly if you're the sole breadwinner, maybe even more difficult. And but later in life, in your career, I think once you're established, you have a bit lesser worries about building up that business, and then you can also spend more time, maybe with your family. I mean, I'm in that situation now. I've got two grandchildren, which I enjoy spending time with,
Amazing.
but that would have been more difficult, I think, 40 years ago, right? So
Of
I
course.
can I can totally understand, but there is of course that shift when
Yeah.
you're more established and you have more time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you mentioned time. Of course, time is our commodity, but money still comes into play. And I know that many designers are not necessarily good business people. How would you describe yourself? Are you a person that is good in balancing the business side of things as well as the design side of things?
Embarrassingly enough, I wasn't. I was terrible, in fact. Okay,
Mm,
I was purely a designer who all what he thinks of was a design, 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 design,
yeah.
design. And you live in your own little world at some point. And I
Mm,
think big part of my understanding of the value of monetizing the business is it being exposed to all these mentees over years and talking to clients and attending meetings that not
mm,
necessarily lighting designer is involved in, like from a cost saving meetings, for instance, and
yeah.
some things that talks with a different perspective of things just shifted my mind, with all honesty, between it is becoming from a purely a designer to the
Yeah.
entrepreneurship. Okay, so the fact that you have to be born with it, I don't necessarily agree with that.
Yeah.
It wasn't the case for me, at least. Okay, so I shifted this to the entrepreneurship, and that naturally then you start to get into the business side of the equation and
Mm,
try to make sense of things. And I openly admit that in the last 4 or 5 years, it has been business studies for me because
mm,
ultimately, to run a successful business, you need to be aware of so many other things related to the operation side.
mm,
Not necessarily that you have to do it yourself, but I think a successful business owner have to be aware of it, and you don't have to be good at everything, and that's a
mm,
fact.
mm.
But you have to be aware of things so you know what the decisions are be based on, and then you can lay your trust on either people or yourself.
Yeah, yeah. There's a saying that says, if you want to wish your enemy problems, wish them a lot of staff. Uh, I don't know if you ever heard that, but but the point I'm trying to make is that over time, I think, and you have to lead a business, you spend more and more time in looking after your personnel, your team, your staff. and you do less and less in terms of design. At least that has been my experience. And that's what I hear also a bit from what you are saying, right? It's
Of
something.
course.
Yeah, you move over time, and you shift a little bit your priorities, and your involvement in things becomes a bit different.
Of course, absolutely. I mean, there is this famous quote. I don't want to say it. I don't memorize it in specific, but something along the lines of, if you think if you hire an expensive employee is not a good idea, think of it
Yeah,
just if you're gonna go with the cheap one. So cheap one
yeah,
is just you're gonna spend on them way more money. They're gonna
yeah,
have just fast turnover and more. You keep hiring more
yeah,
people. So
yeah,
which brings me to the again my most precious commodity that I have, which is time again. And I
yeah.
always tell my guys, I spend time with you, and I'm giving you. This is the most valuable. No
Mhm.
money I can give you is equivalent to my time. This is my.
Yeah,
This is the one thing that I'm draining away from me. I'm giving it
yeah,
to you. So giving them the passion and the love and the direction that I can afford to them to get them to the point that they were at or they're at. I think this is where the character of the company that we're building
mm,
tends to be slightly different than the outer hectic world, where but it's not the case. So employees are definitely our biggest asset by far.
yeah. Absolutely, I can't
Yeah,
agree more.
yeah,
Now, talking about quality,
yeah.
I want to know if you've had any horror stories over your career in lighting with, I don't know, contractors or clients that have been really difficult in terms of, you know, allowing you to do your design work the way you would love to do. I mean, there's always so many people involved in a project. You're just a little part in the whole chain. But having clients that understand you and that are willing to support you is not always the case. I'm sure you have encountered that as well. Do you have any project stories to share where you are tearing your hair out of your head out of frustration?
Well, I mean, my torn head is obviously is obvious here on this picture. So
Look at
I don't
mine.
have to tell him. I don't have to tell. I can tell. I can tell you I have a couple of projects more than mine.
Yeah,
But I can. But yeah, we listen. I mean, we had so many things, and
mm,
I would love to say that I've seen it all. But every time you think you've seen something,
yeah,
here it
yeah,
comes a whole different thing. And
yeah.
I think it starts from small things. Like for instance, when you have an encounter of a client asking, and this is a typical thing I think globally, client ask you for unreasonable deadlines, right? And me being a young designer back then, I was always doing what I can. I worked the extra hours, I burned the midnight oil, etc., to try to please the clients.
Mm,
And one client, for instance, would tell me, "Listen, I need this by 8 p.m. today," and I tell him, "No, listen, it's not possible. No, you have to try." He keeps pressurizing me, and then here the time passes. It's 4 p.m., 5 p.m., and I see that no matter what we do, it's just not gonna work. And this was my first time, again, as a young designer, to call a very senior director on the client
mm,
side and tell him, and with no bosses authorized, nothing, I call him and I tell him, "Listen, this is not going to happen. If you want to fire us now, just feel free to do so. It is not achievable." And I'm just waiting for a bullet to come across the phone, just like
yeah,
here I am, this because, and it actually hurt to not be able to deliver something that I'm
yes.
passionate about on time. And a client, his response, he went silent for like 5 seconds, which was like the longest
Mm,
5 seconds. And then he answers, "So how long do you need?" I told him I need to like at least tomorrow afternoon. "All right, okay, just make sure it's done correctly." We
uh,
hung up the phone, and this was a game changer for me. All right, it's
yeah.
not always a one-way communication, really,
No,
and
exactly.
it's not, and it's we have way more into us, but you have to have the guts to do so, and you step it up. And if you just need to get the trust of a client. If a client knows that you're doing what you can, you're capable of doing things fast and efficient, that's all what you really need. And you're knowledgeable enough you become really their consultant.
Yeah, yeah.
Then once this trust is established, a lot of things are easier.
Speaking up often earns you a bit more respect, I feel, because I've had situations also where I didn't dare, certainly in the early days, I didn't really dare to speak up or confront my client. But once you confront and speak up and are prepared to walk away, then suddenly you earn the respect and you see things are happening.
Yeah,
Exactly like you were saying. Yeah,
of,
absolutely.
of course.
Very.
I mean, and respect is earned. It is definitely a true thing. It's
Yeah.
just you can get a respect in another way, different with certain privilege that you may have, whether a financial status, whether call it what you want to call it, but racial status of some sort in some countries. You can call it what you want to call it. Maybe age privilege for some example. Sometimes you need the gray hair in some meetings, and I can give you that's example that happened literally a few
Mm.
days ago. But that's a very short term. All right, this is just for a first moment part, but eventually, or after a short period of time, it's the depth and weight of your value is what you're gonna get
Mm.
your respect.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
But I think you need that to balance, your failures and your successes. Sort of makes it whole and complete because you learn from your failures and from your struggles and your challenges. But then at the end, there is the rainbow, and you have your projects where you really look back with so much pride and
Ah,
satisfaction. Right? Tell me,
of course.
I'm sure you have a couple of those.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's just listen. It has been an incredible journey. I couldn't be more grateful on the
Mm.
opportunities that I've been given, whether by my ex-colleagues, employers, current staff. It was just
Mm.
really, and it's not really flowery word, but that's the case. So
Yeah.
I think the fact that you work on a Burj Khalifa or working on all these gigantic projects, it's
Mm.
obviously front page kind of a award and quality to all these things. But I think the earned respect in the market is very rewarding.
Yeah.
And I think if I can tell you, if I name a couple of projects that really stand out for me as I'm privileged to be working on, I think one of them would be the Lighting Institute. Okay,
Mm.
and I think Lighting Institute was a passion that came from the heart and took a lot of my
Mm.
most precious
Mm.
commodity and my time. And I
Yeah.
think the moment of being awarded the best education institute worldwide in Rotterdam in 2019, in a room full of
Yes.
1,500 of the world's best lighting experts, I think I couldn't ask for more. Many people told me over the years, "Oh my God, this is an incredible achievement. Well done, well done, well done." But when you have this recognition among the peers
Mm.
and
Mm.
the experts, it was just I don't think any moment could could
Yeah.
overpass that. So
Mm.
that was a big one for sure.
Yeah.
Another one is for sure my first project that I won an award for, which was the Dubai Mall. And I think this project comes also to my heart, being the largest in the world. But I think it's genuinely beautiful project that it is. It's all white interiors, so you cannot compromise anything with the quality of the lights being
Yeah.
installed, the
Yeah.
performance, any malfunction in any of these issues or depreciation of any of the lights will just be easily spotted. So it has to be flawless. And I was also surprised because being in lighting, you always enter the project and you look in the ceiling how this place is lit. And funny enough, when the project opened, it was my first and maybe one of the very only projects that you walk in and you don't look at the lighting at all. And it was like maybe that's the key to its success. There was nothing about the lighting that stands specifically out. It's just you read the whole space as a one piece. And this
Mm.
was this was really interesting. And again, it was winning the first Middle East awards for the best project in this region and so on and so forth.
Mm.
So these moments, particularly at a younger age, was were determinal for me and just frames a little bit of my character and boosted a lot my confidence. That you would
Mm.
sometimes you think, okay, I'm a good designer, I'm a very good designer, but am I good as I think I am? And
Mm.
sometimes you need this appreciation
Right.
from the outer
So,
world.
are you a religious award submitter?
uh, I used to, at some
Yeah.
point in my life, I used to, um, up to I believe 5 6 years ago.
Mm.
Me personally, okay,
Yeah.
sometimes I have issues with the recognition
Mm.
because sometimes it's just if it doesn't have the value it brings truly,
Mm.
I'm not seeking the trophies. Okay, if
Yeah.
it is an award by the sense of the word, you've done the work, it's valuable, it was measured and evaluated by the
Mm.
right individuals. And that's exactly
Yeah.
why I go back to this PLDC room, because these are the experts. If I'm getting
Yeah.
something, it's
Yeah.
based on my expert's opinion. And similarly, if an award is weighed by these kind of professionals, it has a whole different value.
Mm.
Nowadays, it's not as broad as it was before. We have lesser bodies. Yes, there are so many great new initiatives, etc., etc. But I tend to lose a little bit interest in the last few years
Yeah.
compared to what it
Yeah.
was before. And maybe it's part of just growing older, I guess.
Yeah, but there's also a lot of like commercial awards, where you nearly can pay to get an award, and as long as you send in nice pictures, you're nearly sort of guaranteed an award. So I think it loses a bit shine. But if it's judged by your peers and actually properly also assessed by going to site and looking at it, I think it's a bit of a different thing. Now, we live
Definitely.
in a totally different world nowadays where social media, mobility, interactive things, uh, artificial intelligence, things are changing. Does that have any impact on the way you are doing your lighting design? I mean, obviously, you've been around for quite a while, and I think this whole social media and artificial intelligence is starting to have quite a big impact, I think, on the way we behave and the way we promote maybe ourselves also.
Yeah, yeah, that's a whole different game what you said, and it's from one side, it's yes, it's a game changer in so many ways, and it does bring a lot of different way of thinking. I mean, if all honesty, the only real thing that made a big difference in the last few years, in my opinion, was COVID, and it has a lot of positive things to it.
Mhm.
Whether it's going to be distance learning, distance working, remote working, remote collaboration, all these things. That's incredible value that comes along with
Yeah,
it. That wasn't
yeah,
necessarily as dominant as it is right now. So that was a fundamental game changer to the way
mm,
we work
mm,
and collaborate. And now I can collaborate with another expert across the globe on a
mm,
project just for the sake of making bringing the best minds together. So that's all good in that sense. Now, when it comes to social media part, and I think this has been quite a concern for me in the past year, particularly, because there has been a lot of trends in the last 2 3 years with with COVID being introduced, or
mm,
we had to encounter that. There were waves of trends that
mm,
we cycled through, whether
mm.
by Bitcoin, whether by
Ah, yeah.
NFTs, whether
Mm,
by real estate booming and Airbnbs, whether by artificial intelligence, whether by UFOs in the sky, whether by so many things. And when you take this seriously, and I'd like to see, like, I'm curious many times in the agenda of all these trends, and sometimes I'll be surprised. And one of the things that I encountered recently, where there was a lot of booming, of like, yeah, you should purchase this, or you should invest in this, and you should do this, all these things. And then you go to experts on the ground, and they contradict what's been told, and makes you question all
yeah,
what has been told them. Well, here's one thing, but on the ground is a whole different story. But all of a
absolutely.
sudden, the whole thing shifts, and you don't see these trends anymore over time. Like, how many times now you see these NFTs that it used to be bombarding social medias before? Now all
Yeah.
these funny things, and yes, there is the Bitcoin and all the other cryptocurrencies, but it's not as propaganda as it used to be before. So I'm very cautious now on, yeah, it can be whatever trend that might be, whatever breaking news it can become. There are these just I can just believe it straight away. And so back to the point, your question, I don't want to divert much from it, is the artificial intelligence and so on. First of all, let's just be clear on something. I prefer natural intelligence, okay? But and it should be the case all the time. But I think it was very good. It's a very good tool, whether by Mid-Journey or many of the software that we literally use. We had to experiment. We had to see what it can bring, and it did incredible job in so many ways. But I noticed many of the people who post on social media, they tend to it's just they're either seeking likes and seeking attention on one side, or it really
Yeah.
truly limits the capabilities and the drives of some of the design and the value a designer truly brings. You
Yeah.
bring human connection, you bring emotions, you bring things that machines will never learn. And no matter who tells you that machines will learn a few things, there are things that they're not meant to be learned. And I know
Yeah.
that this might be superstitious, because no matter what we thought, robots can replace many of these things nowadays. But I think from one side, I see people who didn't have any sort of creativity. Now, all of a sudden, they can post 40, 50 things. But when you tell them which one I would choose from, they will never tell you which one is better for me. So eventually, there is the human interaction that really decides, and it shouldn't be a robot to do so. So yes, from an inspiration, think outside the box. You don't have time for a new creativity. Yes, it can be a tool, but you need to have a solid individual that can actually drive that and to the best of your company while maintaining this human interaction part, because this eventually, I believe, is where true value is.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah, I also feel that there's a risk of losing your identity if you hide behind artificial intelligence, or you're, like you say, looking for likes on social media. That sort of defeats a bit the purpose sometimes, I feel. But I can hear the way you speak that you're a very passionate man. So one of the questions I always ask is, what drives Waleed out of bed every morning? What is the passion that drives you to do what you do?
Well, it's yeah, everybody has their own thing. I don't know if I should say it out loud, but literally lighting does.
Yeah.
I can't have enough of it. I mean, today's a day off, and we're having this conversation, and clearly it cannot finish, whether on time or even 10, 15 minutes later. It's just lighting it has been a big passion for me throughout. So being a hobby is also, it's a double-edged weapon, because you cannot really stop it. So it's kind of
Yeah.
addiction to some sort,
Yeah.
which brings that passion, and that I think maybe it translates sometimes in the way I speak. Sometimes it helps with my colleagues to just drive them a little bit to the point that they want maybe a little bit faster, a little bit shorter. So all this is good, but again, to draw the line of where to stop is sometimes even more challenging. But lighting is
Yeah.
a big one of it. Time is another thing that I'm very conscious about now. So whether spend the time for a little bit healthier life, a little bit time with the family. I know that I compromise that a lot, so I have to keep that always as a priority nowadays.
Mm.
So yeah, these are the main drives. These are the main
Mm.
drives, I guess.
I've always felt that passion is something that helps you also overcome adversity, because you're it's something you get up because you love what you're doing, and even if there are difficult days, that passion always helps you to keep on going. I feel. I mean, it has been in my case. I've had also my share of issues and problems, but I love what I'm doing, and it has kept me going all the way. So looking ahead, what do you think the future looks like for you?
Hmm. Uh, yeah, I wish I knew that answer. I wish it's that easy to figure out. But I think how to maintain a balance, and we spoke about this before this
Yeah.
conversation, is how you really can evolve the company, the passion that I have,
Yeah.
to balance between running the business part of it, the craft that you're trying to bring in the projects.
Mm.
So eventually you want to run a business that is profitable. Otherwise, there won't be business sooner or later. So you
Yeah.
need to make sure that the business side of things are taken care of properly. I think we're in a very comfortable situation right now, but I think it's more clever that the lesser of my I want to have lesser and lesser value
Mm.
being physically present than anything else. I want many people to take what I have and take it to the next level. And I think
Mm.
this would be an ultimate goal for me, whether from an institute standpoint or CD+M. Yes, I'm proud over the years to have the value I bring to the company, but eventually I'm not going to be the one who's giving the love and attention to all these clients and customers and projects. And I want equally the people who are the new generations to taking this over and just expand from it.
I like to say that the ultimate goal is to make yourself obsolete, basically. So
That's very true. That's very true.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that would be ideal.
Yeah.
When all this is done and dusted, what do you think your legacy will be?
I don't know. I don't know if that I will have one, but I would like to think, at least for my employees, my family. I have two little boys, not so
Yeah.
little anymore. The elder is at 12, the younger is 8, 9, just turned 9 a few days ago. But I think the legacy between my family and my employees are good enough for me. If it expands beyond that to whether the community that I managed to teach over the years, or the region here that I think maybe I helped a little bit in bringing some of the knowledge of lighting, that would be great. And just the fact that I was one of a big network globally is already a privilege.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so
Well said. Well said.
yeah.
I normally end this Lighting Heroes session with a rhetorical question where you can ask me a question, which I'll try to answer, but also a question that may be of interest to our community.
Yeah.
Do you have such a question for me?
Yeah, I have many. I'm not sure of how much. Just giving me one question is a question by itself. Why are you giving me one question? You know, but we can go with one now. But definitely, I would love to. I mean, it's never going to end these kind of conversations, I hope.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I applaud the effort that you're doing. I know that you and the team that you've been working with over the years, whether on design point of view or the VLDC parts, and your travels and interaction has been overwhelming in many cases, exhausting, passionate, and I don't want to ask a rhetorical question about how you managed to do this, because there are so many drives to it that I get some of it, all right, and each of us has his own thing. But I think what would be interesting for me, talking to so many people coming from different cultures, backgrounds, maybe someone lighting, someone not. Did you have a similar interaction, one-on-one talk, to whether it's going to be a client or somebody who were literally interviewing, that literally blew your mind on their approach, on how they are, or the way they think? It's just simply as that, maybe culturally, maybe professionally, maybe client handling, whether it's an example or the way they actually approach things. Was that specific, very interesting individual, without even, don't have to name them, but it's just why this was quite an interesting thing for you?
Interesting question. I definitely have a few people that have had an influence on my life.
Okay.
People that said things or did things in their life that I thought, yeah, that I've carried that with me. One, I want to start with my grandmother. Makes maybe a strange, but she was one of the very first female architects in France, and she never bothered or was worried about what other people thought. She was always busy doing her research, and I don't think she was a great architect, but she had her own way of doing things, and I loved the way that she just went about her things and did her research, and she wrote a couple of books. She was also an educator. She looked after her kids during the war and educated them, and she has been for me a very inspirational figure in terms of making sure you do what you love and what you think you should do, and not bother too much about what other people think about you. That's one. The second person that had a big influence on my life and the way I was formed was my boss, one of my first bosses in Philips. He was a great manager, and he really helped me or taught me maybe better how to manage things. He said, Martin, if you have an issue, just sleep on it. Don't react emotionally on things, right? Just let it sink in. Think about it. The soup is never eaten as hot as it's being served, right? This kind of thing. So he had a great influence on the way that I handled and managed things. That was another important mentor in my path to what I am today. And during my career as lighting designer, I met the people that had the biggest influence on me were architects, people that told me things. One of the architects that I met in my early days was C.Y. Lee. I don't know if you know him. He designed the 101 Tower in Taipei.
Okay.
Um, yeah. And we did projects in China. He had an office in China, and I worked with his team there, and I had done a concept presentation. I mean, we're talking about 25 years ago or something, 20 odd years ago. But and we did a dry run in terms of doing the presentation for a client. And when I had finished my presentation, he asked me, Martin, what is your story? What are you actually trying to project with your lighting design? I mean, it looks good, but I don't understand what it is that you. So he taught me the value of creating a story in your lighting design. That was a really valuable input, because I didn't realize, I just was intuitively designing, not realizing that it's not necessarily a storyline that captivates my client when I do the presentation. And there was another project with another architect from the US, in which I was always very wary, being raised within the Philips original family in my early days. It's all about functional lighting and no glare, these are things. And the project that we had a lot of polished materials. I was trying to do my best to have not any unwanted reflections and trying to integrate. And he said at one point, Martin, it doesn't matter if there's some reflections. That's part of the whole interior. That's what I want. Don't worry too much about reflections. All materials are reflective. So I want things to be reflective. So don't worry about this too much. So he taught me a lot about the value of materials and the interaction between lighting and materials. There's probably a heaps more that has formed me over the years, but yeah, and then there's people from different backgrounds. I've been in India and China and Europe. They all have sometimes different ways. One other little anecdote, and I could go on for hours, but one other little anecdote is that I was designing for office lighting in Pakistan. And at that time, lighting levels would have to be 300 or 500 lux or whatever for lighting standards. And I come in these, I think it was Lahore. We were doing a project, and I came in the actual office, and their standards were like 50 lux or something. That was already some sort of luxury. So when I came in my design of 500 lux, I said, Martin, what are you doing? 500 lux? We have 50 lux, man. 150 lux is already, So you need to put things in perspective. And that's the other thing that I think learned is that, yes, standards are there, but you also need to put it into perspective in where you apply it and how you apply it. I'll stop here, but I think I could go on for hours with these kind of stories.
Of course, I think it's every day, but yeah, I think there are these moments that just literally correct your path, or at least guide you to where you are right now. And I think it's always good to come back to those, because these are eventually part of the legacy that we pass on, So
I'm trying to curate that into my third book at the moment, all these stories and experiences. It will probably take me another year or so to get that done, but it's interesting to reflect back, and just exactly that question that you were asking me is the question I'm asking me. That's why I have these examples actually readily available, because I've been thinking about them over the last couple of weeks. So yeah, it just fits in perfectly. Waleed, thank you so much for this interview. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you as always. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for all the efforts and all the people behind the show for this. But Martin, always a privilege, and I really look forward to seeing you in person soon.
Yes, we will. Thank you very much, buddy.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.